My daughter playfully mocked him for being weaker than her previous dad, but he took it badly. Hello, Reddit. I'm sitting here absolutely shaken, torn between heartbreak and anger, and I need somewhere to let it all out. Right now, you're my safest option, because I don't want this getting back to my friends or family. Not yet, at least. I'm desperate for advice because I don't know what to do, and I cannot lose my marriage. I just can't. So, let me introduce myself. My name is Tiffany. I'm 32 years old, and my husband, let's call him Mark, is also 32. We've been married for 2 years, and I have a 12-year-old daughter from a previous marriage. Before I met Mark, my life was a chaotic mess of failed relationships. It felt like I was on a never-ending quest to find someone who could step up and be the father figure my daughter deserved. And honestly, I was sick of being disappointed. I know some people might think it's selfish, but I had standards. I wasn't just looking for anyone. I wanted someone without kids of their own. That way my daughter could be their main focus, at least until we decided to have children together. It wasn't asking too much, was it? To have someone who would love her unconditionally, treat her as his own, and give her the stability I'd been trying so hard to create. My first marriage, though? Well, let's just say it was a disaster wrapped in charm. Her biological father was the kind of man who could walk into a room and have everyone hanging on his every word. Charismatic, larger than life, the kind of guy people couldn't help but admire. But underneath all that charm, he was toxic, manipulative, dangerous. I didn't see it at first. Not fully, anyway. By the time I realized just how damaging he was, it was almost too late. Things spiraled, and eventually he ended up in prison. And yes, I made sure of that. I wasn't about to let him destroy both my life and my daughter's future. I then went through a plethora of horrible relationships until Mark came along. Mark felt like the answer to everything I'd been looking for. He wasn't flashy or loud or overly charismatic like my ex, but that was part of what drew me to him. He was the opposite. Gentle, thoughtful, and kind in ways I wasn't sure I even deserved after all the chaos I'd been through. He had this quiet strength that was so unlike anything I'd ever experienced, and it pulled me in almost immediately. But I'll admit, he wasn't exactly perfect. From the beginning, it was clear that stepping into the dad role wasn't something he was entirely comfortable with. It wasn't that he didn't want to, it was just who he was. Mark is naturally introverted and doesn't have that larger-than-life confidence that makes people instantly gravitate toward him. And honestly, part of me found that endearing. It felt refreshing after everything I'd been through. Still, it was frustrating at times. I needed someone to step up, and Mark wasn't always great at that. He was hesitant, unsure of himself, and I could tell he was struggling to figure out where he fit into our little family dynamic. I tried to be patient with him, but it wasn't easy. Sometimes I'd catch myself wishing he were a little more like my ex. Not the toxic parts, obviously, but the parts where he knew how to command a room or connect with people effortlessly. I understood that Mark wasn't going to be like that, and I told myself it didn't matter. But deep down I couldn't help but compare. And I guess that's where some of the cracks started to form. Not just between me and Mark, but in how I handled things with my daughter, too. Looking back, I can see now how much those comparisons might have hurt him, but at the time, I was so caught up in trying to make everything perfect that I didn't even stop to think about how it might feel for him. Mark has always been the quiet type, the kind of person who blends into the background rather than commanding attention. It's something I've always appreciated about him, his calm, steady presence. But let's be real, it's also a double-edged sword. His introversion makes situations like this infinitely harder for him. He doesn't have that inner confidence or boldness that some men seem to exude, and unfortunately that lack of confidence spills over into how he approaches being a father figure. And honestly, his struggles in connecting with my daughter have only magnified those insecurities. My daughter is the complete opposite of Mark in every way. She's this bright, vibrant ball of energy who thrives in the spotlight. She's outgoing, social, and full of life, always looking for something exciting and new. Mark, on the other hand, is, Mark. He's nerdy, bookish, and happiest when he's holed up in his office, quietly reading or working on whatever it is he does in there. They couldn't be more different. And for a long time, they just couldn't find a way to connect. Not that Mark didn't try. He really did. He would come to me, ask what she liked, and try to find ways to meet her where she was. He even subjected himself to her favorite TV shows and movies, things I know he hated, just to have something to talk about with her. But my daughter, she wasn't having it. She was still grieving her dad in her own way, and to her, Mark wasn't a father figure. He was just some guy. She missed her real dad, knew she had one, and didn't see the point in bonding with anyone else. I kept telling myself that it would get better, that they just needed time, more opportunities to get to know each other, and eventually they'd find common ground. I was so sure that one day the awkwardness would disappear and they'd form a genuine connection. But now, looking at where things stand, I honestly don't know if that will ever happen. And if I'm being completely honest, I didn't exactly help the situation in the beginning. I had this awful habit of comparing Mark to my ex-husband. It wasn't intentional. I wasn't trying to hurt him, but those comments would just slip out. I'd say things like, "Oh, my ex was so much better at this," or, "Your approach is so different from how my ex would have handled it." At the time, I didn't think much of it. It was just me talking. But eventually, Mark couldn't take it anymore, and he sat me down for a serious conversation. He told me how much it hurt to feel like he was constantly being compared to someone he could never be, like he wasn't good enough. And in that moment, I realized I had been thoughtless. I apologized, promised him I'd stop, and did my best to make sure my ex-husband's name never came up in our conversations again. But the damage was already done. What I didn't anticipate was how much my daughter had absorbed from me. She had picked up on those comparisons, and before I knew it, she started doing the same thing. At first, it seemed harmless enough, just little comments here and there. She'd make these playful remarks about how Mark wasn't as strong or as fun as her real dad, and honestly, I laughed along with her. I thought it was funny. I mean, Mark never reacted, so I assumed he didn't care. I should have stepped in. I should have told her to stop. But at the time, I thought it was harmless. I thought Mark had toughened up, that he'd learned to let it roll off his back. He stopped reacting after all, so I figured he was fine. It never occurred to me that his silence wasn't strength, it was resignation. The first breaking point came during what should have been a simple, easy family evening. We were all sitting together, just relaxing and chatting, when my daughter started up with her usual comments. This time she was talking about how her real dad was so much stronger than Mark. She said it in that teasing way she always does, like it was some kind of joke. But Mark didn't laugh. He just sat there staring at her, completely blank, before getting up without a word and walking to his office. I tried to steer the conversation somewhere else to diffuse the tension, but my daughter didn't get the hint. She kept going, kept teasing, like she had no clue what kind of damage she was causing. I finally had to tell her to stop, but by that point it didn't even matter. The damage was done. Mark had already shut down. He stayed in his office for the rest of the night. Afterward, I sat down with my daughter and tried to explain. I wanted her to understand how much her words had hurt him, how she'd crossed a line. But she just shrugged it off like it was no big deal. She said Mark was overreacting, being too sensitive, and that she didn't mean anything by it. To her, it was just harmless banter, nothing serious. Later that night, I decided to check on Mark. I knocked on his office door, and when he finally opened it, I apologized, told him I'd talk to my daughter, and promised I'd make sure it didn't happen again. But he didn't want to hear it. He just shook his head, brushed me off, and told me he needed space. And honestly, I didn't know what else to do. I felt like I'd done my part, tried to smooth things over, tried to fix it. But if Mark can't toughen up a little and not take everything so personally, what am I supposed to do? It's exhausting being the one constantly stuck in the middle, trying to hold it all together while he retreats into himself. At some point, I feel like he has to meet me halfway or this is never going to work. Honestly, I'll admit it. Maybe I didn't take care of things the way I should have. Maybe I didn't take things as seriously as I should have in the beginning. When Mark brushed me off, I assumed things were fine. I figured he'd get over it. He's always been reserved, always the type to internalize his feelings rather than talk about them. I took that to mean it wasn't a big deal. But my daughter? She saw something different. It was like she found Mark's Achilles heel, and once she saw how much it got to him, she wouldn't let it go. Every little thing turned into another opportunity to bring it up. She'd poke and prod, and every single time she'd harp on it like it was her new favorite game. And here's the worst part. I let it happen. I hate to admit it, but I hardly ever stopped her. I thought it was funny. I thought it was harmless. It was like a little running joke in the family, and I didn't see the harm in it. At the time, it didn't even cross my mind that it might be hurting him. Mark eventually stopped reacting to her comments, and I took that as a sign that he'd gotten over it. If he wasn't saying anything, then surely it wasn't bothering him anymore, right? That's what I told myself. I mean, if it really bothered him, wouldn't he have spoken up again? So I let it continue. Looking back now, I can see how wrong I was. I should have stopped my daughter in her tracks the first time she said something. I should have stepped in and set boundaries. But I didn't. I thought it was easier to let it slide, to keep the peace, rather than risk making a big deal out of something that felt trivial at the time. I guess I assumed Mark was stronger than he was. I mean, he's the adult in this situation. He's supposed to be able to handle a bit of teasing, right? And my daughter, she's just a kid. Kids don't always understand the weight of their words. I told myself that it wasn't her fault, that she didn't mean anything by it. But deep down, I think I knew. I think I knew it was hurting him, and I just ignored it. I know now that I was wrong. I see it so clearly now, and I wish I could go back and handle things differently. But at the time, it was easier to let it slide. Easier to laugh along with my daughter than to face the fact that she might be crossing a line. Easier to assume Mark would be fine than to acknowledge that I was wrong. Then I guess things just got worse. Mark became distant, like seriously distant. He started pulling away emotionally, and it was obvious. He started focusing more on his work or his hobbies than he used to. He just shut down. He got cold. And it wasn't just me noticing it anymore. My daughter started picking up on it too. She'd ask me what was wrong, and honestly, I didn't have a clue. I thought maybe it was just work or stress or something he was dealing with. I kept telling myself he'll get over it, that it was just a phase. But no, it didn't get better. He just got colder. I could feel it in the air between us. He didn't make an effort anymore. He didn't ask about my day. He didn't even bother to talk to my daughter the way he used to. There was no real effort to bond with her. And that's when I started to really panic. But still, I didn't know what to do. What do you do when someone you thought you knew, someone you thought was on your side, just starts to pull away? Then about a week ago, something happened that I thought would change things. Mark agreed to have dinner with us. He hadn't been doing that for a while, so I was honestly kind of relieved. I thought, okay, this is the first step. Things might be getting better. But nope. It was like the moment my daughter started cracking those jokes again, the whole evening just fell apart. She was being her usual bratty self, teasing him about things she'd been saying for weeks, and this time, Mark just snapped. He told her that if she thought her real dad was so much better, then she should go join him in prison. That was it. He told her he was done with us, packed an overnight bag, and just left. I was floored, absolutely fucking shocked. I didn't know what to do. My heart was racing. I was in disbelief. I didn't know how we had gotten to this point. I thought things were bad, but I didn't expect this. I thought, okay, maybe he'll calm down. Maybe he just needs space, but no. He didn't come back that night or the next. A whole week went by and he wouldn't pick up my calls. Wouldn't reply to any of my texts. Silence. Just nothing. Finally last night he picked up the phone, and instead of apologizing or even trying to fix things, he says he's done with me. That's it. He wants a fucking divorce. I couldn't even process it. I'm sitting there in disbelief, wondering how the hell it even got to this. How did we get here? I know my daughter was wrong. I've admitted that to myself. She's a kid though, I get it. Kids say stupid shit. But Mark? He's an adult. He's supposed to be able to handle this stuff. He's supposed to be the one to step up, not just fold and walk away like this. But now he's giving up on us. And I just don't know how to fix it. How the hell do I fix this? I've spent the last few days thinking about how to make him see it, how to make him see me, how to make him understand that this isn't how it's supposed to end. I've done everything I can to try and be understanding of his feelings, and I've tried to make my daughter see how wrong she was. I've tried everything. But now he's telling me he wants out. What do I even do with that? How do I bring him back? Or is this the end for real? I want to fix things. I don't know how, but I need to. I'm desperate to get him back, to fix whatever the hell happened between us. I'm just so fucking confused right now. I can't help but wonder if it's too late to fix it. But part of me also thinks, what could I have done, really? It's not my fault that Mark can't handle a little teasing. If he had been more assertive, if he had taken charge and stepped into the dad role with confidence, maybe things wouldn't be like this. Maybe my daughter would respect him more. Maybe she wouldn't feel the need to compare him to her real dad. Update. Hello, Reddit. All right, let's get this out of the way. I get it. I'm a shitty, disgusting human being. I'm selfish. I'm evil. You all have made sure to emphasize that over and over again. Trust me. First of all, yes, I already acknowledged in my original post that I know I'm wrong. I know it's selfish of me to want to be with someone who doesn't have kids when I have a kid myself. That's not news to me. But guess what? People are still allowed to have preferences and standards. I didn't handle the situation right, I know that, but you don't need to keep throwing it in my face as if I'm not painfully aware of it already. Second, yes, I know I was flippant. I didn't handle the issue seriously, and I tried to excuse my daughter's behavior because, well, she is a child. But that doesn't make it okay. I've apologized to my husband for that multiple times. I get it. I was wrong. And trust me, I've been reading your comments. Every single one, every DM, every harsh, judgmental word. You've made your point, loud and clear. But here's the thing. I'm trying to fix it. After reading all the feedback and reflecting on how much I've screwed up, I decided to take action. I sat my daughter down and had a serious conversation with her. I told her how wrong we'd both been. I didn't show her the harshest comments because, well, she's still a kid. But I explained how hurtful her words were, not just to Mark, but to everyone involved. I told her we both needed to take responsibility for our actions. To my surprise, she acknowledged it. She said she'd apologize to Mark. So I found out where Mark was staying. Our mutual friend tipped me off. And it was a Sunday, so I figured he'd be home. I took my daughter with me and we went to see him. He was surprised, obviously. I mean, I didn't give him a heads up or anything, so that's on me. We sat down and we talked, or tried to at least. My daughter apologized first, and it was heartfelt. I could tell she meant it. Mark accepted her apology and even told her he wasn't mad at her. But then he looked at me and it all fell apart. He said he wasn't angry at her, he was angry at me. That's when the real conversation started, and let me tell you, it was absolutely fucking brutal. He laid everything out. He said he was tired of me refusing to take responsibility, tired of me brushing things off, tired of being treated like an outsider in his own home. He said this wasn't the first time he'd felt like this, and he couldn't do it anymore. And then he said it. He said he wanted a divorce. I was stunned, completely fucking blindsided. I thought this was a simple issue, something we could resolve with a couple of apologies and a real conversation. But no, he said he's done, that he's still young, and he's not going to waste his life feeling like this. What the fuck? I begged him to reconsider. I cried. I tried to explain that I was working on myself, that I was trying to fix things, but he wouldn't budge. He told me he'd already made up his mind, and then, to top it all off, he said I could stay in his house for a few more months to get my things together and leave. Leave? Just like that? I was freaking out inside, but I had to force myself to keep it together. For my daughter's sake. Even then, she noticed something was wrong. She could tell, but I haven't told her the truth yet. I don't know how. I don't want her to blame herself for this, even though deep down I know this is all my fault. I don't even know what to do anymore. I'm spiraling. How did it get to this? This wasn't supposed to happen. This was supposed to be something we could fix, something we could work through. I'm exhausted, I'm heartbroken, I'm lost. I know I'm the one to blame, I accept that, but I'm so fucking tired. Update. Hello, Reddit. What the actual fuck? Honestly, the comments saying I saw this coming or this was inevitable are just Whatever, good for you if you could see it coming, but guess what? I didn't see the shit coming. I know it's my fault, I've acknowledged that, but does that mean I can't feel blindsided? So, where do I even start? Let's get to the big one, the doozy. I got served. Divorce papers. Yep, I got them faster than I ever thought possible. One moment I was holding on to the hope that we could fix things, and the next, my entire world was ripped apart. At first I thought we could salvage it, maybe therapy, some couples counseling, or just a heartfelt conversation. But no, instead of fixing things, I spiraled. Oh boy, did I spiral. I'm talking full-blown stalker mode. I'd like to say I'm ashamed, and I am, but at the time, I couldn't even see how insane I was acting. I started following him, threatening him, texting him constantly. It got so bad that he packed his stuff and left to stay, get this, at his beach house, which is miles away from his workplace. I guess he didn't mind the drive as long as I couldn't get to him. His beach house is the one place he knew I couldn't get to because, by then, I had made such a mess of things that I was banned from his workplace. Let that sink in. I got banned from his workplace. It got to the point where he was actively filing for a restraining order against me. Do you understand how bad it has to get for the person you were married to, the person you loved, to feel like they need a legal document to keep you away? Yeah, that's where I was. And then, one day, I just stopped. I don't even know what triggered it. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was everyone around me calling me out. Our mutual friends turned their backs on me. My parents told me they didn't recognize me anymore. His parents? Oh, they were delighted to remind me that they always knew I was trouble. Isn't that fucking lovely? So I packed up my things, grabbed my daughter, and left. That's it. Just like that. Everything was over. I feel blindsided, gutted, fucking shattered. How did it get to this? How did we get here? This was such a simple issue. Something that could have been resolved with communication, maybe some professional help. But no, he was done. And I guess this was his way out. Do I think he was tired of me? Yeah. Do I think he used this as an excuse to discard me? Also, yeah. It feels like he'd been done for a while and just didn't have the guts to say it until now. And now, here I am, back at square one. We moved all the way to my parents' house, which was so far from everything we knew. That meant quitting my job, so now I'm job hunting, which is a fucking joy, let me tell you. My daughter had to leave her school, say goodbye to all her friends, and start over. She's so angry at me. And you know what? She has every right to be. I uprooted her life because I couldn't keep mine together. I'm spiraling. I'm still spiraling. Everything feels so heavy, like there's no way out of this mess. I'm tired. So fucking tired. I thought my search was over, that I'd found the person I was supposed to spend my life with. But now, I'm back at the starting line, and it's all my fault. Update. Hey Reddit. It's been a while, yeah, a long while. I've been busy trying to pick up the pieces of the life I completely shattered. Where do I even start in this whirlwind that's become my existence? Let's just rip the Band-Aid off with the big one. The divorce. Yep, finalized. The doozy, as I've been calling it. The part everyone probably wanted an update on. It's done, over, and dusted. Less than an hour in the courtroom. We didn't have kids together, no shared assets, nothing tying us legally beyond a marriage license that no longer meant anything. The moment he moved out, he'd already separated our finances, so when we got to court it was clinical. Barely an hour, and it was like everything we'd built together never existed. Even now, saying that out loud, typing it, thinking it, it hurts. It feels like someone took a hot iron to my chest and just pressed down. Everything we were reduced to a short legal proceeding and a stamp on some papers. For a while, I didn't even want to update here. Why? Because he found the post. A friend of his stumbled upon it, realized it sounded way too familiar, and sent it to him. He forwarded it to me with a simple, "This you?" I wanted to deny it, I really did. But there was no point. I barely changed any details. It was obvious it was me, or, I guess, someone eerily going through the exact same mess. So I just admitted it. He didn't reply to my admission. Not a word. Just a thumbs up emoji, that's it. I don't even know if he was angry or not. I don't know if he laughed at my desperation or shook his head at my stupidity. If he's following this, if he ever stumbles upon this update, I just want him to know. I'm sorry. God, I am so fucking sorry. It took me too long to fully acknowledge how wrong I was. I was wrong. Wrong to stalk him. Wrong to think that harassing him would somehow fix things. Wrong to think I could bully or beg him into forgiving me. I was desperate. I was spiraling. And I see now how I pushed him so far away that there was no coming back. And I hate that it took losing him to finally understand how much he meant to me. I've been miserable. I miss him so much it physically hurts. He was the one person I connected with on a level I never thought possible, and now he's gone. And my daughter? She misses him too. She thought for a while that all of this was her fault. Can you imagine how heartbreaking that is? Your child blaming herself for your failure as a person? I got us into therapy, because how else do you even begin to unpack something like that? And even though she's starting to accept that this wasn't her doing, I can still see it in her eyes. She wonders if she'd never made that joke. If she'd never said what she said, would he still be here? Therapy has helped me too, but in the most gut-wrenching way. It's forced me to confront just how dismissive, neglectful, and selfish I was. I didn't appreciate him. I didn't see the cracks forming until it was too late. I just kept taking, and when he couldn't give any more, I fell apart instead of taking responsibility. Now I'm just existing. Zombie mode. I go to work because I have to. I pay the bills because I can't let my daughter and me end up on the street. I keep us fed because somebody has to. But that's all it is, surviving day by day. Sometimes I wish I could rewind everything. Go back to the day my daughter made that joke and stop it. Or go back even further to the moments I took him for granted and just change something. Fix something. I know it's too late now, but God, the what-ifs keep me up at night. It's crazy how it always takes losing everything to finally see what you had. Now, sitting here in the ruins of what used to be my life, I realize how important he was to me. How much he is still important to me, even if he's gone. I'm sorry. To him, to my daughter, to myself. And if he ever sees this, if you ever see this, I just want you to know, I was wrong. I was so wrong. And I'll carry that with me forever.